Always keep the Kahans in your prayers. We need it, that's for sure. Okay, let's start off here on page 98. 98. Top of the page here it says, casting out of her mouth. This is in Revelations 12:15. And the serpent cast out of her mouth water as a flood after the woman, that she might cause her to be carried away by the flood. Now, this casting out of the mouth is the power of speech that Satan has. And remember, Satan's been cast down, and this whole world accepts her as a savior and calls her the Lord of heaven. Okay? Now, she sets herself up, and she will try and set herself up in a rebuilt temple, but Satan has the great power and authority which he uses to preach against the house of Yahweh in safety, and severely persecutes those who have not been able to escape to the house of Yahweh. Now remember 2 Timothy 2:19 through 22, where it says about how Yahweh, those who depart from iniquity, Yahweh knows those who are his because they are sealed to depart from iniquity. And then it says about how there's some for honor, some for dishonor, some of gold, wood, and so forth. All of these things, but it's all for Yahweh's honor and glory is the whole reason why these things are done, and all this is according to his plan. Of course, Yahweh will protect his people, remember, because it does say that, he knows those who are his. And if somebody is out in a different area somewhere, in another part of the earth somewhere, Yahweh's going to he promises to protect those whom he's going to call out, because he's got 2 billion people out there that he's going to be bringing. So people just need to stay strong. Yahweh knows, and Yahweh's in full control. So if somebody's not able to make it to Abel at this time, it doesn't mean that they're going to be destroyed. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter. If they stay faithful to Yahweh, Yahweh would resurrect them anyway. So got to trust in Yahweh in everything. And that's what it says in about Revelation. I'm trying to think, it might be in chapter 3 or something. It says those who are for the sword and captivity and so forth, that those would have to go through that. All right, so finally here, through the power of speech, this casting out of her mouth, it says Satan gathers an army of 200 million deceived followers to come against the house of Yahweh in the place of safety. Of course, Satan is out to destroy the earth and get rid of the house of Yahweh. Now, this says, of course, 200 million, which is in the scriptures. That's from Revelations 9, verse 16. The number of the army of the horsemen was 200,000, for I heard the number of them. Okay, but this number 200,000 is not really actually so much a number. Because really an army that size, I don't know why you could even put those kind of people. But it has this number here, when it's traced back in the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Davidson on page 672, it means 2 great armies. It means numerous. It means many. It means powerful. It means 2 great powerful armies, okay? So that's what it's referring to here, is these 2 great powerful armies that's going to end up bringing all of this destruction. Now notice it says, bearing the next fact in mind is that this army is not fighting the battle of the great day of Yahweh. The battle of the great day of Yahweh doesn't take place until after the great tribulation, okay? But this battle here starts when the 7 last plagues are ended, and Yahweh, Yeshua, and all the saints are wiping out the armies and so forth. But before the battle of the great day of Yahweh, when the rulership of this earth becomes the possession of Yahweh, then Satan rules this earth with an almost unrestrained hand until our armies are completely wiped out. And then, the earth would be given, remember, it would be given back to the children of Yahweh. Because the earth was made for man. It was made for man. It wasn't made for the demons and so forth, or the gods. It was made for man. Now, Revelations 20, verses 1 and 2, it says, I saw Malach come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain was in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, who was the devil and Satan, and bound her for 1,000 years. Of course, remember this binding here is not that she's physically restrained or anything, but she'll have no influence. she'll not be able to have any influence. And what has taken place so forth on this earth, on page 99 here, you see that there's numerous earthquakes, there's disease epidemics that spread throughout the earth, there's wars with nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, all these things that come into pass. And like it says, the most ironic thing is that the very gods that this world is worshiping have been the reason for all these curses that's coming upon mankind. But they're too dumb to even realize it, They're totally ignorant. It's like it says about the dogs. They're too dumb to be able to bark, They can't warn, the people can't be warned because they don't even realize what they're even facing. Now, Yahweh was shown in the prophecy of Revelation that mankind was still worshiping these demons even after 1/3 of the human race has been killed. And the government by the people and of the people, and this is what's bringing these curses to pass. The fact is that man wants to rule himself. Man can't rule himself. Man's never been capable of ruling himself. And that was from the very beginning. If man was capable of ruling himself, Yahweh would allow him to rule from the very beginning when he made him. But he didn't, because of the fact that man can't do it, because man doesn't have the sense to do it. He rules by his emotions and so forth. And, when somebody does something to him and you want to retaliate back, that's never a part of Yahweh's way. Yahweh's never, ever done anything like that, and he never will, because it's not Yahweh's character. Yahweh's character is to provide everything for everyone and everybody to enjoy life. The thing is, you can see in the kingdom that if you experience abundant life and you are enjoying life, there's no reason why you would covet the things of your brother, because you have it. So why would you covet something that you already have? So all of these things that Yahweh wants to give unto us is given unto us so that we can enjoy life. And he's going to bless us abundantly. As it says, it's never entered into our mind nor our hearts of what these things are all about. But remember, the demons are led by Satan, and they only influence the mind, because mankind acts on these influences that come forth from carrying out the suggestions of hatred and lust. As it says in Job 4:1-5, it says, "What causes wars and fightings among you? Is it not from this, that from your lust that battle in your members? You lust, but you do not have. You murder, you covet, but you can't obtain." And that's the way it's always been, is that they murder and they covet, but they can't obtain. They can't obtain the things that they're looking for. And they fight and they war. And that's why, when Cain was told that there would be continual war, it's because a continual cycle would continue to last. Because, remember, he was a fugitive and a vagabond, and he was constantly searching. But he could never find what he was looking for. He could never find that peace and enjoyment in life, because he was constantly searching for things and going after it the wrong way, seeking after his own lust rather than going after what Yahweh said to do. But you ask and you don't receive. And remember, Yahweh says ask. Yeshua said ask and you will receive, right? But you ask and you don't receive because you ask with the wrong purpose, in order that you may spend it on your own lust and pleasures. You adulterers and adulteresses, and you remember, that's God worshipers, okay? That's what God worship is. Do you not know that the friendship of the world is enmity with Yahweh? Therefore, whoever will be a friend of the world is the enemy of Yahweh. Because if you become as the world, you remain as a worldling, then you have nothing in common with Yahweh. Because this whole world is deceived. Now, the breaking of Yahweh's law effectively means that you're obedient to Satan, because obedience is worship, as Romans 6:16 says. Do you not know to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey his servants you are? Of whom you obey, whether of sin which leads to death, or of obedience which leads to righteousness. So, service is a choice that we have. Either we can live as Yahweh desires and learn obedience like Yeshua did. You remember, Yeshua learned obedience even to the point of death. That's how obedient he was. He had in his mind that no matter what, nothing was going to stop him from being obedient to Yahweh. And he was obedient unto death. or we can go the way which leads to sin, and we'll be destroyed. But Yochanan the Revelator said that they would not repent of the worship of demons. Even though they see these things taking place, they still will not repent. They won't repent of yielding to the influence of these demons, nor of the service by obeying the lustful suggestions that Jacob said wars in their members. And remember, it wars in their members, okay? There's a war that's going on with these microbes in a person's body, that this war is actually going on, causing the confusion of the mind, causing them to do certain things, to feel certain emotions, to lust, to covet, and so forth. All of these things are, as the King James says, the motions of sin, which refers to the passions and of sin and so forth, which Yahweh says he gave over and to the people over to a reprobate mind and allowed them to have this, horrible system that they have now. Now, the same kind of spirit is the same one that leads men into war, too. In Revelations 9:14 and 15, it says, saying to the sixth mallet, which had the trumpet, loose the four messengers who were bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four messengers were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a moon and a year, in order to slay the third part of men. Okay, and the four messengers, notice, were loose. They were prepared for an hour, a day, a moon, and a year, in order to slay the third part of men. And this really made sense when Pastor said, that it's not for the hour, the day, so forth, but it pertains to the certain time when it's that hour, which would be on that day and that moon and of that year that will slay the third part of man. Now, man would not repent of this worship, of course, because mankind thinks, well, this use of war, and using these weapons and so forth, this is how we can have peace, And now the big thing with the military is automated systems. Everything's going to computers and so forth. They have these little drones and, they have the robots and so forth. It's really big. The military is getting really big on using robots and developing robots. And they want to use them so that they can send them out, ahead of the troops and so forth, so they can go out and scout out the area and so forth. And the question was asked to the big commander-in-chiefs and stuff, will you use them so that, because right now their policy is that no human life would be taken, they wouldn't allow the machines they're developing so that they can recognize people and so forth, and actually we could shoot them very easily, because they have the guns on tracks and so forth and all these types of things. But the policy is that no life would be taken without human intervention, that the human would have to tell the machine to go ahead and fire your guns and so forth and do that. Kind of like they do with the drones now when they fly them on the missions and stuff. However, they could automate the systems to where, and that's what they really want to do, is just automate the systems to where it can make up its own decision, because they can react much faster than mankind and end up just taking the life of somebody. But the question is, when will we allow a machine to have that decision to take a person's life? And so if that's granted, if they decide that that's what they're going to do, which if mankind would continue to live long enough, they would, and it would be just like you see in the science fiction movies where the robots are going around and fighting and so forth, remember RoboCop and all these kind of things. This is the kind of things that's going to, and this is the type of thing that they're thinking about and actually experimenting with as far as, there's things that people they're not even aware of the technology and the things that the military has. But even in the medical industry and stuff, they actually can replace just about any organ that a person has in their body. They can grow it in labs, and they can replace it electronically as well, and so forth. So, nothing is. Remember, Yahweh said in the beginning, He says, nothing's going to stop mankind from developing however they want, whatever route they want to go. And man's ultimate thing is that he would love to be able to take the brain and save the brain and put it, so that you could live forever, because you could just put it into another body, or you could put it in a robot's body and so forth, because they know, and that's what they're searching for, is they just can't figure out where consciousness is, how that comes about. But it shows how wicked and evil their minds are, that they would even think about trying to devise these things so that, you could actually live inside of a body like that, So the next best thing is to just simply making all of these mechanical pieces that you can add on to your body. Okay, so man won't repent of this worship. And he's going to continue using these instruments of warfare and claim that he can have peace. Even after 1/3 of all Earth's population is destroyed, man will persist in this worship. So the stage is set, as it says here. Satan is now ruler of the earth. She's now trying to completely destroy the one group on the face of the earth who will not acknowledge her as their ruler. Okay? And that's something we don't do. Yahweh is the ruler. And Satan is not the ruler. She's the ruler of this earth. She's got the whole earth deceived, except for a very small amount of people who will not allow her to be their ruler, her ruler. It shows the confusion that she has, because you see, as she trespasses against Yahweh to try and take what is his, because Yahweh created us. Yahweh is our creator. Satan's not the creator. So by Satan actually, and this just shows the love of Yahweh, the mercy of Yahweh, and how he lets her go free, to do whatever. It shows the fact that she's allowed to do these things, because she's trespassing when she tries to come against mankind and influence mankind, because she has no authority. We're not hers, But we have been bought with a price, remember? Yahweh brought us back. And so therefore, the house of Yahweh is the only ones that Yahweh is working with, and we're the only ones that Yahweh is protecting, because we're the only ones who have been brought back to Yahweh. The rest of the world belongs to Satan because they obey her. And that's a really big, big thing. And that's the whole reason why she's willing to wipe out billions and billions of people just to destroy an entire planet, an entire solar system, entire galaxy, just to get rid of us. Little puny us. Who are we? As you can see when you read Psalms, like it says, what is man that you're mindful of him, or that you visit him. And that word visit doesn't mean that Yahweh comes knocking on the door. It means offices, that Yahweh's given us offices, that he's willing to give us these things, which Hebrews says is reserved in the heavens for us at this time. But he knew us before we were born, remember. So we've always been a part of his plan. Now he's seeing that plan come to pass as he's looking and enjoying and seeing what he does. Okay, so then Yahweh delivers his people out free using the plagues similar to those he used to deliver his people from the Egyptians. As we see in Revelation 12:16, the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of her mouth. So when the earth opens her mouth, this is known as an earthquake. Now, Yahweh reveals to us in the seventh seal, because of Satan's hatred for us, Satan cast out of her mouth propaganda against Yahweh's house, stirring up hatred to try and wipe us out. But it's according to the energy that Satan displays in order to completely destroy the house of Yahweh that will determine when Yeshua will return to earth. Remember, that's what it says in Thessalonians. So, the harder we strive, the more we strive to overcome, the harder it makes Satan's job, okay? Because remember, she's already got the whole world deceived. She ain't worried about the world. She's already got them. She's concerned about us. That's why she keeps 7 billion people deceived, so that she could pull one person out of the house of Yahweh. Just one person. She would be so thrilled to do that. Now, the prophets of old wrote of the time of the end when the restoration of the kingdom would take place. And one prophet, he might write one prophecy in one era of history, and then another prophet would come along in another era of history and add something to it. But the thing is, they all wrote about the same thing. the same thing. And it's not like today you can go on Google and punch up anything and find anything and so forth. These prophets wrote these things on animal skins and all this kind of stuff. And these scrolls and stuff were put away and saved and stuff. And some of them weren't found for maybe hundreds of years, and they would discover someone else's writings and so forth. But when they compare them, they could see that they actually wrote about the same thing. So that shows the power of Yahweh, just like it says in Kepha, that Yahweh inspired the holy men of old to write these things down for us. Inspired the prophets of old to write these things. So as Isaiah 28:10 says, for precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. And that's the way it is with Yahweh's word. You've got a little bit here and a little bit there. But when you take these things and you put them all together, it gives you the complete picture, because it's bits and pieces here and there. And the reason why Yahweh did that is, remember, Yeshua told his disciples, he says, blessed are you, because the prophets of old would have loved to see and hear the things that you do. And of course, even the disciples, even all that they knew being taught directly by Yeshua, would still love to know what we know today, because we're based upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. So all that the prophets have written and all that the disciples have written and all the things that they're taught, this is the basis of our faith. This is what we had the understanding. So when you put all these things together, the seventh era of Yahweh's house is the only era that has ever known what the plan of Yahweh is. Others have not even comprehended these things. Like prophets would write things down, not even understanding what they were writing, but they were so compelled to write these things down and knew that Yahweh was inspiring them to do it, that they wrote these things down. But yet they never really could understand and see these things. No one but the seventh era of Yahweh's house. So here a little and there a little is the very way that the seventh seal is written. The prophets of old wrote of this time, but without the key to prophecy in the book of Revelation given by Yahweh, there is no way to understand their prophecies. The prophets Yael and Isaiah wrote about the time period called the seventh seal. Without the prophets of old, we cannot understand the book of Revelation, because the two go together. When the prophets wrote about the prophecies, these were things that they're inspired to write. They recorded them for us, and then thousands of years later, you see the other writings that the apostles wrote, and then you can put them together, and you can see the complete picture of these things. That's why the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation go together so well, because they both feed upon one another. So without the prophets, we couldn't understand the book of Revelation. But without the book of Revelation, neither can anyone understand the prophets of old. So it goes together, Without Yahweh's Holy Spirit to guide one in their search of the Scriptures, neither will anyone be able to find the truth of Yahweh in the book called their Bible. Okay? So in the seventh seal, we again return to the beginning of the Great Tribulation, to be shown in the series of events that's going to take place and is taking place. Now, Revelations 8, 1 through 5, we find Yahweh starting to prepare to take the rulership of the earth away from Satan. And the last 7 years of Satan's rule has now come, and the trumpets of Yahweh prepare to sound. And that's what we're going to get here in chapter 9. The first 4 trumpets of Yahweh. You have the first trumpet here. It says, now we'll go to the beginning. And you see in Revelations 8, verse 7, the first Malach sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. And there was cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burnt up. This is not going to be a pretty sight when these things take place. Now, Yeshua Messiah spoke in his time is shown also in Matthew 24, verses 7 through 8. And the King James says, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. And all these are the beginning of the plagues, or the beginning of these sorrows, or the beginning of the tribulation here. And we certainly see these things, as the prophet said that there would be wars, and like Yeshua said, you're going to hear wars and rumors of war, but don't be troubled, because that doesn't mean it's the end yet. But you see these wars And the nations have risen against the nation, more so in this time period in which we're in, as you can see in the news. There's more so, this is taking place to such a greater degree than it ever has taken place in man's time at all. You know, the thing is that it used to be, you never heard nuclear war. You never heard that mentioned. You never heard nuclear bombs or anything. You never heard any of that in the news. That was something that was just, in the time of the Cold War. Yeah, they may mention those things and stuff, a little bit and so forth, and the scare was out there or whatever, but all that was forgotten, put away, Now it's become a common term for them to talk about nuclear weapons in the news, and it shows that they're not afraid to use it because they want to use these weapons that they think is going to blow up underneath the ground, or if it blows up, they're smaller weapons, so it's not going to produce too much radioactivity out in the air and fall out and so forth, but they don't understand that it's going to start blowing up, but that's what's going to lead to all of these things, the great horrors that's fixing to take place. So Yeshua also said in the same chapter, these events, that nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, diseases, and earthquakes. Famines. Now, they know, and the scientists and so forth, and the ecologists and the microbiologists and all these people, they know that if Earth continued on, if we continued on to live, they say within the next 60 years, the Earth would cease to produce any food because of the fact that the Earth is just getting so worn out, But the fact is because they're not letting the land rest, They don't keep that law. They don't let the land rest. If they kept the sabbatical year, the land could replenish itself. That's the way it was made in the beginning. Yahweh didn't make the earth to last a certain amount of time. He made it to last forever. He made it, and he made mankind to inherit. Remember Psalm 37? The whole chapter, the whole thing of Psalm 37 is talking about the inheritance, how man will inherit the earth. The meek will inherit the earth, and the earth is given to the children of men. All of these things are made for us. And that's why you see in Genesis, the very same thing is he made all of the earth, and then he made man. And like he says, he didn't make the Sabbath. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man, so that we could use the Sabbath and utilize it and use it for the work of Yahweh and so forth. But the thing is that if they kept the sabbatical year, if they kept the laws of Yahweh, then the land could continue on and it could replenish itself. This is why today there is no such thing as organic. The house of Yahweh has the closest organic food that there is on the face of this earth. No one else can claim that they have organic food because there is no such thing as true organic because of the fact that GMOs, all you need is one crop, plant it someplace, and when the wind blows, where's that pollen going? It's scattering. It's scattering all over the place, And the thing is, if you have a farm in one place, 30 miles down the road, another farm could be contaminated. But these microorganisms that become defiled and live in the soil, when the wind blows and so forth, carries these things up and moves them over. And this is why the whole earth, as it says, the whole earth is contaminated. And we've shown it before and shown you how that the fact that when the Sahara Desert, the sands and so forth, that blows up, the microscopic creatures that are in that sand and stuff is blown up into the air and travels for thousands of miles and it feeds the rainforest and so forth, the things that keep man alive, that produces the oxygen that we have. Well, when these things are messed up and they can't do their job, who suffers? They do. And as a result of them suffering, we suffer. Mankind suffers because it's our sins that cause that suffering to begin with. So you can see how sin affects not just yourself, but it affects every generation, Mankind in whole is affected by these things. So he continues on here, talks about the famine and diseases and earthquakes, and now you see the earthquakes are coming about where hundreds are being taken place at one time, and it's tremendous because, when you look at the ring of fire, that circles the Pacific and all the way around, these plates of the earth are just moving back and forth with such tremendous power that as they scrape against one another, eventually they got to they're under tremendous pressure, and eventually they got to give loose. And when they give loose, it's going to go, So we see him in Matthew 24, verse 21 and 22. For there will be great tribulation such as not come to pass since the beginning of the world of this time, no, nor ever will be. There's never been anything like this before. And unless those days were shortened, there would no flesh be saved. None. None whatsoever. Mankind would completely wipe himself out. But notice, those days, and we know what those days are the time that Daniel talks about, that time period, a specific time period, will be shortened. Otherwise, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Okay? So it's because of us. It's the elect. The elect are the people of Yahweh, his house. And that's the reason why it's going to be shortened. The second trump, it says, the second trump shows warfare as being waged on the seas. In Revelations 8 through 9, and the second Moloch sounded, and there was a great mountain burning with fire and was cast into the sea. The third part of the sea became blood. Now, when you see the sea become blood, or anything talking about blood, and of course, let's talk about death, okay? It's bloodshed. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea, which had life, died. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. So notice, it's not just these creatures in the sea, but it's also going to be those who are on these ships that will be destroyed. But at the same time, again, you see the connection. And they even have automated ships and stuff that they're working on too. Once they get them perfected, there won't be any crews. They'll just allow the ship to go out by itself to do the dirty work. But it's mankind that are on these ships that are going out there and doing these things that are poisoning the waters. That's how the coral reef got destroyed. That's how the creatures, horrible, horrible things of the sea creatures are taking place. Newsweek magazine, 6/10/1995, reports on the capabilities of nuclear warfare at sea. Now, this report deals specifically with the U.S. undersea nuclear forces. It says, protective zeal. The Walker case would be less unnerving if it didn't involve submarines, now perhaps the most valuable of current U.S. nuclear forces. Two legs of the strategic triad, the B-52 manned bombers and land-based ballistic missiles, or at least theoretically, vulnerable to Soviet attack. The third leg is a strong deterrent indeed, a strategic submarine force with no fixed address hidden in the ocean deep, armed with 16 to 24 multi-warhead missiles each. Of course, those are nuclear. America's 35 Poseidon and Triton submarines could by themselves destroy the Soviet Union many times over. Now, you've seen pictures of these missiles coming out of the submarines and going up. The amazing thing that always amazed me is the fact that when these submarines come out, when they're in the submarine, they're encased with gas, pressurized gas and stuff. So there's this coating of gas that completely engulfs the entire missile. So when it comes up out of the submarine and goes through the water never touches the missile. And so when it comes out, it's completely clean. Once it hits the surface, it's dry and it takes off. And that always amazed me when I found out about that, because it shows the technology of mankind and how, isn't it great that man can destroy himself in so many different ways? Isn't that a great achievement that mankind has done, it's so crazy when you think about it. They actually pride themselves in actually, finding new ways to kill people. Okay, on page 105 here, and it shows a chart here about the hide and seek at sea, run silent, run deep. well, you can see it or not, but there's the submarines and then planes and ships. And then you have the satellite up there in the right-hand corner up here communicating with all of these different things. And that's what they have it developed now too, is in the fact that they have planes flying out, and then they release these little drones and so forth. They'll go out and they'll fly, and they're actually missiles, but they'll go out and they'll find and seek the targets and so forth. But they're constantly communicating back with the planes, so the planes can stay back while the missiles and so forth can go forward and seek out everything and actually report back to them. Now it says NASA, the United States is experimenting with, now this is back, remember this is way, way back, okay? This is decades ago. But notice, the submarines the United States is experimenting with non-acoustical means of submarine detection, many of which involve satellites, but none of them have yet borne fruit. In one technique known as synthetic aperture radar, satellites bounce intermittent radar pulses to the ocean and synthesize the waves as they bounce back, producing computer-generated images showing details as fine as ocean waves only 1 foot high. Actually, NASA can tell whether the ocean has risen 1 inch or not, with the satellites that they have. That's the amount of accuracy that they have. In theory, this should enable a satellite to spot the secret ripples in a submerged sub's wake. But one recent test, when the Navy gave NASA the general locations of 2 U.S. subs, NASA was unable to find them, even under ideal conditions with the subs traveling slowly just beneath the ocean. Of course, I'm sure they probably wrote these things to try and persuade people to think like, oh, that don't work, So nobody would even know about it. When actually these things do, and they actually can do this type of stuff. But they're not going to let on people because, of course, they don't want the enemies to know that they have the technology either. The Pentagon is also, so remember, for every bit of information you have, you also have information that the propaganda that they put out, disinformation. The Pentagon is also experimenting with infrared detection to monitor the wake of warm water left by passing subs. But the subtle temperature differences are dispersed by warm surface waters when the subs are running at depth. Infrared is also absorbed by air and clouds. Another possibility is a bioluminescence, examining the trail of fluorescent light created when a submarine strikes millions of tiny organisms in its path. But the light changes are faint even at the surface, and it could be impossible to detect at depth, though other submarines could possibly spot them. If you remember, NASA does have that capability. You remember they watch the plankton and so forth, all right? They capture all of this, and they know all of these things. So these are all little hints and things that are thrown out, but it's trying to make, each time you read this, it makes it sound like, well, we're thinking about this, but it's probably not possible, Because remember, Yahweh already said, whatever wickedness is in man's mind, he's going to allow it to come out. Lasers. Still another futuristic technology involves monitoring radiation phenomena, such as neutrinos that are produced in large quantities by nuclear engines and cannot be captured by any known shielding device. Neutrinos are these atomic particles that fly throughout the earth. They're flying through the room right now. They'll fly through your bodies. They'll fly through everything. It seems like there's no stopping what they can go through. But you're constantly being bombarded by these things. The Navy also has considered using blue-green lasers tuned to a frequency that passes through ocean water like light through glass as a kind of undersea radar to illuminate enemy subs. Using the laser light, however, gives away the tracking sub's position. The Soviets have been, if they couldn't do these things and if they couldn't tell where the enemy was, they wouldn't be using submarines, right? They know. They have, everybody thinks about the old days of just what they have with just sonar, of hearing the little bing and everybody's completely blind in the water. They're much more advanced right now than what they ever were back then. The Soviets have been experimenting with synthetic aperture radar for at least a decade. But exactly what the Navy knows about Soviet detection capabilities is among the most classified of military intelligence. In fact, outside experts say that the Navy may well have been made secret strides in non-acoustical detection and reported some successes as failures to keep the Soviets off guard. What do you know? Oh, man. Curiously, one of the most revealing studies of the ASW game to date is the best-selling novel, The Hunt for Red October. And they made a movie out of that, too, remember? Published earlier this year by the U.S. Naval Institute Press, the plot centers on the defection of a Soviet missile sub-skipper in the race by both superpowers to find his vessel, the Red October. The search is made all the more difficult because the sub's propellers were tucked inside two funnels running from bow to stern that shield them from transmitting noises to the water. The author, Tom Clancy, who never served a day on the submarine, says he invented the tunnel propulsion system complete with a thermal Navy test of the concept at the David Taylor Model Basin outside Washington. To Clancy's astonishment, after the book's publication, he received a letter from the head of the test facility saying that such a concept had indeed been tested there. In fact, that the Navy plans to use a tunnel propulsion system with some key technical differences from Clancy's model. In it, the new attack sub, the SSN-21, as do in the British in their new attack sub, the Trafalgar. Now, of course, they also use water propulsion, where they suck in the water and they push the water out in heavy pressured streams. And all of these things help keep down a lot of this stuff too. But as the U.S. subs grow even quieter, they too are becoming more powerful. Because it used to be there were old diesel engines and so forth, and then they went to the nuclear powers. But they're always constantly working with the propulsion unit because they know that, even though you're underwater, you still leave a wake through the water. And this is how the radars and these different techniques, so they can listen, they can hear the water and so forth, and train themselves to hear these things, and the equipment nowadays can pick those things up. So they're always striving to do something better. Kind of reminds me of a documentary I saw one time about, it started off with the development of tanks, and, you look at the old tanks, that's what it looked like, it's just a tank. But, they start off in World War I. They were very crude. They were very huge and so forth. They had these big old huge wheels and so forth on them and stuff. But as time went on, and the armies began to develop these things, one side, the U.S. would come up with something, and then the Russia would come up with something, and the U.S. would come up with something, and the Russia would come up with a counterattack, and back and forth, back and forth. And one of the main things, of course, on the tank is if you hit the tracks and knock off the track, the tank is useless, So they started making these guards and so forth on there. And one side would make the guards to guard the tracks, and the other side would figure out a way how they could come with a missile or something and destroy it and so forth. Then they made it to where on the sides of the tanks they can actually within milliseconds, when a missile is coming, it can actually eject that part of the side of the tank off, and it hits it and explodes on that to keep the people in the tank safe and stuff, So, it's amazing the way that they go on and on and on and on. And now you got, like, the Abrams tank is the super tank of the world, and here they can be traveling 50 miles an hour down the road, going up and down, up and down, up and down, and point that Terran up there to a target a mile or two away and fire it and hit it. Exactly. That's the type of technology that we have. And even though you're going up and down and moving and so forth, the computers are still capable of figuring out everything that it has with all the movements and the angles and so forth, and allow you to still fire that thing. So it's really amazing what they have done. But then again, what do they use it for? But to kill people. You see, this is all that man can come up with. There's all these fantastic ways of killing people. With a 4,000-mile range of the Trident missile for example, is nearly twice that of the Poseidon and will increase the Trident submarine's patrol area by a factor of 10, allowing it to cover its targets in the Soviet Union from as far away as the Indian Ocean. The new D5 missile will increase the range of the Trident even further, opening up still wider areas of ocean in which to hide. More important, D5 missiles represent a great leap in accuracy. Experts say that they should be able to strike within 500 feet of Soviet targets, compared with the 1,800-foot range of their predecessors. 500 feet. That's pretty decent, and I'm sure it's even greater accuracy now. So this Newsweek article gives a lot of details here about the nuclear undersea capabilities of the U.S. And, of course, the scriptures tell us that one day, the capabilities are going to be used to destroy 1/3 of all the sea life and 1/3 of all the ships in the sea, as we just read there in Revelations. Now remember, Yeshua said in Matthew 24:22 that all flesh would be destroyed during this time if the days were not shortened. Now that word shorten here, it means to cut short. It's number 2856 in Strong's from 2849. And 2856 means to dock, to shorten. And 2849 means to curtail or to reserve, to reserve, to chastise. All right, so this word shorten means to curtail or to dock. So Satan, of course, is the cause of these raging wars. Satan broadcasts fear to the cardinal mind, the human mind of the world's leaders. They get involved in these things, and they keep thinking that they can make a name for themselves. It goes all the way back to Genesis. Remember what they did? They wanted to make a name of themselves. They wanted to be known as men of renown, right? They wanted to make a name for themselves. And this is the same thing that you see going on today. Everybody wants a legacy. Everybody wants to leave something behind of how great that they were, And these leaders get involved in these things. But you can't blame them because that's all that they know. That's what they were taught. This system taught them to be that way. And that's why we're going to destroy the system. We're not going to go and destroy people. That's why Yahweh says, it's not by swords, it's not by might, but it's by my spirit, by my laws. It's the teaching of my laws that's going to turn the hearts and the minds of the people, right? So, we're not going to go out and destroy the armies of this earth. That's not what Yahweh is equipping us for. He's equipping us with something far more powerful. It's called the subconscious mind, okay? That's something that can't be touched by the world. It's neither by Satan's. And Satan knows that. She knows the potential of mankind. She knew it from the very beginning. She knew that Yahweh's plan, what he was going to do with mankind. And that's why she set off in the beginning to be able to get to mankind. And she's been working for 6,000 years to try and get to the point to where he would destroy himself. She's been patient, She's been patient because she sees her plan finally getting to the point to where it looks like it's going to take place. But she's going to be sorely disappointed. So Satan broadcasts fear to the cardinal human mind, to the world leaders. And then Satan, in effect, causes these leaders to build nuclear arsenals, then causes these leaders to use these nuclear arsenals against each other. So Yeshua shows us that worldwide wars would begin to rage. And the Apostle Yochanan showed that these wars are going to be raging on the land and on the sea. All of these things are going to be used to wipe out 1/3 of life, 1/3 of trees, 1/3 of the green grass, all of these things. Now, on 108, the third trump. And we're not talking about one of the president-elect's family members here. Okay. The third trump. How does Yahweh entail Satan's activities? Well, he shows us through the sounding of the third trump. In Revelations 8:10 through 11. And the third Moloch sounded, and fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were like a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died in the waters because they were made bitter. So waters We know this is symbolically spoken of people, as Revelation 17:15 says. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the horse sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So notice it covers the whole vastness of the earth, the whole population of the earth here. Because it's many different peoples, it's multitudes, groups of people and so forth, and different nations, and of course the different languages. And remember, in the beginning, man spoke one language. There was only one language, but then the languages were divided. Okay, and that was all for a reason, is to try and divide mankind, because Satan figured, hey, divide and conquer and so forth. But of course, Yahweh allowed it to take place so that his plan could take place. In effect, Satan falls from heaven and falls upon all the peoples, the multitudes, the nations, and the tongues. Now, this word wormwood is number 894, and it means a type of bitterness or calamity. Okay, so this bitterness of this calamity is really what is allowed to take place upon this earth, upon the inhabitants. As we see in Revelations 12, 9 through 10, Revelations 12, verse 9 and verse 12. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. And remember, she was cast out because, remember, it says there was found no place for her. Where she could no longer hold the office that she had and the positions that she had to be cast out. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. She was cast out into the earth, and her angels were cast out with her. So she's got some help there. However, we have more help. Because remember, the Malachim outnumber 2-1, right? So we got more on our side helping us. Therefore, rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell on earth. But woe to the inhabitants. Now notice what he says here. Rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. Why? Why would the heavens be rejoicing? Well, because they're going to see the revealing of the sons of Yahweh taking place. And when they see the sons of Yahweh being revealed, they know that their redemption is going to be near. Okay? So they're looking forward to seeing us come to the completion when we can see this take place. So rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe, notice, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil has come upon you, having great wrath, because she knows she has but a short time. Remember that short time, that time that is cut short, that no flesh would possibly be saved, as Yeshua talked about. This is the short time that she's coming in wrath upon everybody, trying to destroy this earth. Then we jump over to the fourth trump. The fourth trump shows the effect of the war in heaven between Yahweh and Satan and her angels and so forth. In Revelations 8, verse 12, and the fourth Malach sounded, and the third part of the sun was struck, and a third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and the day did not shine for a third part, and likewise the night. So this is talking about the fact that time will be cut short. There's war in heaven, which cuts short Satan's authority from heaven. Revelations 12, verses 7 through 9, again it says, and there was war in heaven. And Micaiah and her Malachim fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought with her angels. Boy, I bet that was a sword fight back and forth. Huh? That's how all the Christians always show them. They always show the angels with their wings, and they got a shield in one hand, and they got a big sword in the other one, and they're fighting back and forth, It's like, Yahweh doesn't need an army like that to fight to do his will, But that's what's in the minds of people, because that's the way that mankind thinks, They always thought that by force, you go by force and you take over what you want. So they think the Malachim do the same thing in that manner. Okay, so Micaiah and the Malachim fought with the dragon. The dragon was fought with her angels, but did not prevail, nor was there any place found any more in heaven. Notice, there's no place. There's no position that she could hold there where she could actually work with Yahweh. So the courts of heaven said, you've got to go. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. and she was cast out to the earth, and her angels were cast out with her. So not only is Satan cast out of the heaven, but Yakanan shows also her angels were cast out, as we see here in Revelations 12:3 and 4. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon her head. And her tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, did cast them to the earth. So you see there that 1/3 of this population that was in the heavens served Satan at this time, but the other 2/3 are still faithful to Yahweh and to Yahweh's people and stuff too. And I think we need to stop. Okay, yeah, I guess it's time. Huh? All right, so we'll finish up here. Well, we finished up on page 109. We'll take off on page 110 next week. May Yahweh bless you, man.